Welcome to Lunch with Tech Leaders, where we have engaging conversations about software development and cloud engineering with industry leaders and subject matter experts. These episodes are created by the Great Lakes Tech Leaders, an online community of technology practitioners. Please come join the conversation by visiting gltl.rbn.ai. Again, that's gltl.rbn.ai. Now strap in, because we're deploying to production in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lunch with Tech Leaders. I think this is episode 16 of our gatherings. So this week we got an exciting topic. We're going to talk about CDK versus Terraform, and dive into what we've experienced with the two products, where we see the industry going, and just some of the pros and cons of each. But first, I want to introduce to my co-host here, Tom Kowalski. Tom.
Howdy, Tom Kowalski. Yeah, I worked with Adam for a while. Very interested in these technologies. I feel like it should be more, the title's a bit confusing, right? CDK Terraform, maybe like CloudFormation Terraform, right? And but yeah, excited to talk about the topic.
Yes, I agree. It's a silly title, but I think it drives some emotions, and people want to chime in. So you got to have the controversial title to bring in.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And before I kick it over to my next co-host, I'll kick it over to my next co-host, Jason Brown with RateBrain. Introduce yourself, Jason.
Hey, yeah, happy to be here as well. I'm a cloud solutions architect at RateBrain Networks. And I've got some experience with CDK, CloudFormation, and Terraform. So I'm really happy to be part of the conversation.
Cool. And big news this week with our Discord community, the Great Lakes Tech Leaders. We've hit the triple-digit mark, over 100 members. So exciting to see that. Would like to encourage people to invite your colleagues and technical practitioners to join us. You can find us at leaders.rbn.ai and just hop in, and we've got a great community we're trying to build out. So I encourage everyone to hop on and check us out. Okay. So let's kick it off. History lessons. Where did infrastructure as code come from? When did it become a thing?
I think, it was just inevitable, right? With the cloud, right? And being able to provision things with an API kind of, is the next evolution.
Yeah. So what I did a little research this week. So around the early 2000s is when you have this explosion of virtualization, right? So, and that kind of created orders of magnitude more complexity with doing stuff in the web, right? So it kind of just happened because it needed to. And then, of course, by 2006, you got Amazon Web Services becomes a thing. And then what's interesting is that in 2004, like what are the cloud native companies now, like Google and Amazon, they all had internal APIs that they were already using to manage their infrastructure, right? So I think that's really kind of what created the need for infrastructure as code. And then of course you've got the DevOps movement in the 2010s and right around that time as well, and that putting stuff in a repository to manage your environments and use the benefits of version control is kind of like how it all came to be. My first taste of infrastructure as code was in 2014 when we did CloudFormation for some of our environments. So Tom, you were there.
Yes.
Jason, how about you? When was your first foray into this is infrastructure as code and I'm doing it?
Right. Yeah. Definitely CloudFormation for me. I know actually when I got brought into RBN, I think it was 8 years ago now. Yeah, I was brought in actually as a app dev because I have a software engineering background. And then over the years, I had like one foot in both worlds because I got more exposure to CloudFormation. And it wasn't really a big jump for me because, I was having the background I had, it was just like writing JSON, right? So to build your architecture. So it was kind of a natural thing. But that was the first time I got involved in writing infrastructure as code. Was with CloudFormation.
Sure. Yeah, so a little bit of history about, CloudFormation, since that's kind of seems like where we all started, because I think Amazon was kind of the first to really make it like an official product, right? Like this is a publicly available thing. So actually I don't have the history on, so 2011 is when AWS launched, made CloudFormation available. And the very next day, the co-founder of HashiCorp actually made a blog post about how impressed he was with what CloudFormation was, but thought they needed to create an open source cloud agnostic solution tool. So that's kind of the birth of Terraform. And then a few years passed from the founder, that was Mitchell Hashimoto, from his blog post. A few years passed, still there wasn't anything in the market, and then in July 2014 is when they released the Terraform 0.1, which supported AWS and DigitalOcean at the time. And what's interesting about the Terraform story is that it wasn't super popular right out of the gate. There was actually some consideration of shutting down the project after about 18 months. But then in 2017, things really started to take off, with their downloads doubling pretty much every month. And then, of course, Microsoft, they partnered with Microsoft in their Azure platform, and that really kind of, I think, took them to a whole nother stratosphere. And today, from what I'm seeing, Terraform's like the king of the court in terms of infrastructure as code. Like lots of companies are using it, lots of people like it. Supports over 1,000, I think it's 2,500 providers, thousands and thousands of modules. So it's really taken off. Yeah. Anything to add there, Tom, Jason, and what you've
Yeah.
seen? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, like you touched on earlier, with AWS having their internal APIs, having those being able to be used through like scripting, things of that nature, it was still pretty cumbersome. So having there was a definite need for a tool like CloudFormation to get things more organized in terms of being able to spin up your virtualized infrastructure. And yeah, I mean, with Terraform, even though it came to a rocky start, definitely has kept pace, and some could argue have outgrown CloudFormation as well. So yeah, it's just really interesting to see the explosion of a lot of new technologies being just emerging since then. But there is a reason why Terraform is considered industry standard and has continued to persist in that way. Yeah, definitely. I mean, HashiCorp has been iterating over Terraform for a long time, with overcoming some of its initial, I guess, limitations, you could say. But yeah, there are still other technologies emerging, just like CDK, right? Which is kind of like the next evolution of, in my opinion, infrastructure as code in general, like going from just like scripting APIs to a configuration management, infrastructure management tool using things like JSON and YAML. So the HashiCorp language is kind of like JSON or YAML. And then from moving on from that to using actual programming languages, which then you can, I think we had a discussion a couple weeks ago about writing good software architecture, like good software architecture design. And a lot of those principles actually map more closely when you're able to use like actual programming languages rather than just like data serialization or markup languages.
Yeah. That's all stuff we're going to dive into here real deep, but let me give just a brief history of CDK, and then I think we're going to dive right into like a lot of the great stuff you just brought up, Jason. So AWS CDK is launched in 2019, July 2019, open sourced, it lets developers define cloud application resources using programming language rather than these declarative templates, right? Because I come from a programming background too, where it's like when I saw infrastructure as code quote for the first time, it was like, well, this isn't code. This is just like a JSON file. So yeah, I think it was pretty easy to learn it in terms of back to CloudFormation, but CDK came about from a project from AWS was trying to re-architect their search service, and the team wanted to build it in a modular way so they could do things in isolation and evolve things independently. So they used CloudFormation, of course, because that's what they had. But they saw that there was an unmet need, and that need is a lot of those things you just touched on, Jason, like abstraction, inheritance, separation of dependencies, things like that. So they proof of concept it in Java, created what they call the constructs, which define AWS resources. Got it done really quick, showed it internally. People were blown away by it. Met with customers. That's what Amazon does a lot. They work backwards from the customers, and they open sourced the project, and they also open sourced the JavaScript interop interface, which converts the TypeScript that CDK is written into all the different programming languages, which I mean, that's pretty awesome open source project as well, JSI. So pretty cool stuff there. That's the history of CDK. So yeah, back to the title you brought up, Tom. It's not really fair to compare CDK to Terraform, but I think a lot of companies are like, trying to make sense of it and what they should go with. So yeah, I'll kind of just open it up and see if people have thoughts and things they want to dive into, but I've got plenty more questions to shoot out if we need some dialogue.
Well, I think what you just said there, what the company wants to go with, and I think that's a good question and spot to start. That article that was just put out there that Jordan put out is a great read, right? Of who's writing the infrastructure as code, and is it a company standard or is it a team standard? I have my feelings on it. Does anybody? And I like that article on how it says, yeah, it depends, right? Depends on your organization, how it's managed, and how the teams are organized. I personally feel that the decentralized approach is the way to go, right? The loosely coupled, highly aligned, where you have a platform team that could make it easier for the different stream aligned or delivery teams. But ultimately, it's up to those delivery teams to make the choice of what technology they want to use, unless there's set standards, right? Like we have to for security reasons, audit, compliant reasons, things like that.
Yeah. That's the age-old question. Who's going to write this stuff? The argument for Terraform is that once you learn the HCL, which is HashiCorp, the brain fart.
Language.
Yeah, HashiCorp language. You've learned once you learn that, you can basically create infrastructure in any cloud provider, because you've learned the structure of that, and you can you only have to learn it once, and then you can pretty much run your workload in any environment. I threw up my quotes because there's always challenges and quirks if you're switching environments. Whereas CDK, is a preferred programming language. So I think the obvious benefit there is you can write your infrastructure code right in the same language as your source code, right? So there should be zero learning curve in terms of like learning a new language. I think there's a lot to learn in terms of using code to define infrastructure resources and what they do and how to manage them and how to the configuration of it all. So Derek, you got something to add there?
Yeah, that's also kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because a lot of the times the driver for infrastructure as code is coming from the don't want to call it DevOps team, but like the traditional more sysadmin infrastructure type folks, right? Who may have a preferred language that may not be the same one that the source code for the application's written in. But those folks may also have a harder time picking up on some of the patterns or software architecture that might be beneficial out of the gate to setting up a good CDK project.
I was kind of thinking about the reasons why Terraform is the way it is. I believe the big feature of Terraform when it came out was versioning. So, as you're writing out your HCL and you're getting this JSON thing back, it may seem simple. However, if you change that to some complicated code, it may be more difficult to recognize what the new change is and then diff the new infrastructure that you need to deploy. So I think that's why, that was from what I understand, what I remember, the original Terraform's really cool.
Yeah, I think Terraform does it compared to what was available at the time. It does a pretty good job of giving you a reconciliation of what's going to change. I think that CDK does that pretty well now too. CloudFormation, it was very difficult to understand that. So I think that's where Terraform had a big advantage.
Yeah, and just to clarify to our listeners out there, CDK basically is just code that converts your code into a CloudFormation template. So it's just kind of another layer of abstraction. So at the end of the day, you end up with a CloudFormation template when you're running the CDK synth or CDK deploy.
And I think Kyle's comment was more about the previously before what do they call them? Change sets were available. There was no good way to get a broken down list of exactly what resources are going to change. You kind of had to sift through it yourself back in the day. Yeah. CDK actually, when you do a diff, it'll run all of those change sets for you and pump the that output right to your console.
Yeah. So it'd be nice to get a little maybe some insight from someone who's experienced with the differences between because Terraform uses a state file to manage the state of the system and to monitor your changes, whereas CDK uses the CloudFormation templates and does a diff. So Phil, and don't mean to call on you, but I think you've got a lot of experience in this realm. If you could kind of give us a breakdown of how the state files work in Terraform versus what you do in CDK / CloudFormation.
Sure. I could get one understanding. I do have them. So it's like you said, state files are kind of akin to CloudFormation templates for Terraform. By default, they typically store local to your machine, but there are multitude of ways to get them in a state where multiple developers can work with them. The most common use cases I've seen is a S3 bucket with Dynamo table locking. One of the negatives of state files is that it stores whatever the state was of the last deployment and keeps it there, whereas the CloudFormation and CloudFormation templates kind of do a checks and balances system.
Well,
What do you
CloudFormation
prefer?
service is the state, right? So they kind of keep that on the back end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it kind of my understanding is with CloudFormation, if a deployment fails, you get rolled back automatically. Whereas with Terraform, you just the state gets changed and you're borked, or
Yeah.
it could be problematic.
With the Terraform state, it will lock the state on a deploy, give you the changes, ask if you want to deploy it, and when you do, it'll start running through those changes. Typically kind of top down, unless you have things like depends on Depends on is just what it sounds like. You're telling this one resource it depends on another, so it won't try to do anything with it until the other resource is done. But if you have an issue with that deploy halfway through, anything that was done before that will remain as it was throughout that deploy. Everything kind of following pending the resources will just not update. One of the big issues you'll see when stuff like this happens is if you're trying to stand up a new resource that causes a replacement, it's going to tear down the old resource, then try to stand up the new one. If the new one doesn't come up, it's going to fail out, and that resource it tore down is going to remain removed. So now there's just nothing there. And as far as your state's concerned, there's nothing there. So usually you'd have to manipulate state files, roll back versions, and redeploy to try and get it back up and working, or troubleshoot your problem to get it redeployed and corrected.
I didn't realize that it tore things down before building
Yep.
new. I thought it worked like CloudFormation where it would build a new and then remove the old.
Nope.
Interesting.
It's been one of my biggest complaints with Terraform.
The
Yeah, that's a bummer.
rollback process easy enough once you're able to streamline, just kind of get me back to my last safe position?
If you do versioning with modules, it is. If not, then you're looking at having to play with git tags to bring back your, when it wasn't a working state, redeploys, or otherwise you're modifying the state files and redeploying states, and it's just it could be a hassle. It's a lot of manual involvement if there's a problem, whereas CloudFormation has the self-checking built in.
I think it can definitely become a big problem too when you're like, if it's just like a single resource that it doesn't depend on anything or nothing depends on it, it's probably a little easier. But like, let's say you have like a load balancer listener or something like that, where like a load balancer depends on that and other things, like it's going to become more difficult to like potentially roll back in that scenario.
Yeah, it's just going to kind of cascade the problem down.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was researching kind of on this discussion, some people were saying that the way Terraform does it is preferred for them, for not doing the automatic rollback, where the automatic rollback with CDK CloudFormation is sometimes not desirable. But I don't have like examples of like why. It seems like having things roll back to the last time it was stable seems pretty good to me. But I'm sure there's a bunch of use cases out there I haven't thought of where you don't want it to roll back.
I think in that vein, it might kind of come down to what environment you're using it in. Obviously, if it's in a prod environment, you want that stability. You want the ability to roll back easily. If it's something in like a dev environment, maybe that rollback might become more of a hassle.
I mean, part of the reason that we're using infrastructure as code is so that we can catch these changes in an environment before prod, right?
Yeah.
I would say yes. Current client work says that's not always true.
Yeah, there's always edge cases, right?
So I want to touch on something before we run out of time here, which is that Terraform has announced their first generally available release of CDK for Terraform. That was August 1st, 2022. Gonna post a little diagram in the chat here, if it'll let me. But
who's driving that? Is
it's
HashiCorp driving that?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I was a little wasn't quite sure what to expect out of it, but I mean, it looks like Terraform is maybe recognized that there's limitations with the declarative language, right? Like there's only they're kind of missing that ability to do higher level programming and abstractions and more sophisticated patterns. So I think this is probably their response to make it so that people who actually want to write real code, sorry, I don't want to offend anyone, who want to write write their infrastructure in an existing programming language, it allows them to do that. And it looks like it works with all their providers. I haven't had a chance to to test it out personally, but it seems like it could be a game changer if people like Terraform and they like the state file setup and they want to try to do some more higher level programming. Why not try CDK for Terraform? Anyone on the call had a chance to check it out or know of it?
I guess one thing I wonder is like, is there a paved path for someone who like is using HCL and wants to migrate to use the CDK and you just pick a language, I guess. I'm curious if they have like a migration path.
In their notes for the announcement, they said they have improved convert command, which will convert your HCL templates to the equivalent configuration in your preferred language.
Nice, nice.
So
I would be interested in seeing how that, like, what type of code that actually produces.
I would also be interested in seeing that.
Yeah.
I assume that it's probably just like, vomits it into a single script or something like that.
yeah, I mean, it might get you started, and like maybe you could like glean from it how to how to do it. Like
Go
if
back
you're
and clean it up a little or something.
like just take a small module, convert it, see what the thing does, and be like, oh, and kind of understand how to approach it from a more strategic way. But yeah, I think that'd be cool. So yeah, I'd like to see. I'd like to talk. It's so new. I don't know. It's version 0.12, so it's really new. I'm sure there's lots of challenges with it still, but it seems like it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, I'm definitely very interested in this. I mean, I've got a kind of a bias, with my background. Like when I saw CDK first emerge, I was really excited to be able to use, the high level abstractions, like you were talking about, classes, polymorphism, inheritance, to make it more, well, not only cleaner, but so that infrastructure as code would be more code-like, I guess you could say. So seeing the jump that HashiCorp's making with Terraform, I'm really excited about this. It seems like a natural progression, and also very revealing too that they definitely see Terraform as more analogous to CloudFormation, like HashiCorp themselves. But they've always been very good at adapting, like introducing conditionals and, looping, like some of the basic stuff that wasn't there at the beginning, over time. I'm really excited to see them adapt and change and see where they take it from here.
Definitely. Yeah, when I talk to people in the industry, I was recently at KubeCon in Detroit, and just trying to talk to folks about what are you using for your infrastructure as code. I mean, I don't think I ran into everyone was using Terraform that I talked to, and I would kind of promote CDK just because I'm a fan of it. But it just seems like if you're doing anything multi-cloud, people are just going to jump on the Terraform bandwagon, is what I saw. And so I think that this, Terraform CDK for Terraform gives people kind of the best of both worlds potentially, where you can do all your multi-cloud stuff, but I'll still take advantage of a higher level programming language.
Yeah, definitely agree. I would argue that Helm is a infrastructure as code tool. So technically, most of those folks are probably more involved with at the KubeCon, more involved with Helm, but the underlying infrastructure that manages Kube cluster. A lot of the reasons that people choose Kubernetes over something more simple is because they need a multi-cloud cluster, right? So
Yeah,
definitely interesting.
and there's so many, like Pulumi's kind of, I think, trying to become a rising star, or is a rising star. There's lots of players in the infrastructure as code space, so we only touched on really two today. But there's tons of things out there. So I don't know if anyone else has any cool ISE tools that they think wanna give us, talk about briefly. But yeah, feel free.
Troposphere tried to do this try to do what CDK is doing way back in the day. and it just never really got the traction. It was for CloudFormation only, and it was only in Python, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, they kind of don't really hear about them anymore, or that project at least. With CDK getting so much traction, I wonder if, and then with CDK Terraform coming up, I wonder what the future looks like for Pulumi.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're getting close. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think something about Helm that makes it very powerful, right, is like you're using like Go templating language along with some of the other extra stuff, so you can do a lot of pretty powerful things with Helm when it comes to like Kubernetes provisioning.
Yeah, definitely agree. I like how Helm charts rely on, other Helm charts quite a bit, and I would like to see a lot more of that in the CDK world. So.
Great. Well, we're getting close to time here, and I want to respect everyone's lunch hour. We all got day jobs we need to go back to, but wanted to give a chance for our co-hosts Tom and Jason to offer any final thoughts before we sign off here.
There's a lot of things I could say, right? But just going back to the discussion of, is it like a company standard or individual teams? It'd be really interesting. I want to post it out there to it, maybe like a poll or whatever, and see how people feel about that.
Maybe you should join us next week when we talk about our delivery teams taking ownership of their infrastructure as code.
That's gonna roll right into that. And then the other thing too, just on this topic, I'm a big fan of, especially if it's open source, right? It's declarative on the top, and then underneath it, what gets implemented, right, is code. So it's just interesting that it's kind of like backwards with CDK. But I wonder if like the next evolution is like a very generic declarative, right? Like here is an app, right, that has these things, and underneath it CDK generates it for whatever provider the same way, right? Like here's my code, this it has it may need a load balancer API, whatever, right, declaratively on the top, and then CDK, whatever version of CDK, is then imperatively creating those stacks on those providers. So I don't know.
I think you just invented platform as a service.
I've been thinking about it a lot lately. So yeah.
Jason, anything before we sign off?
Yeah, sure. Just wanted to echo what Tom was saying too. I mean, it seems like we're on the precipice of the next evolution in infrastructure as code. So it's really exciting to see like where they could go and where things are going to take us next. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, so no clear-cut winner. I think based on the call here, it seems like a lot of people have a programming developer / background, so it seems like maybe we're gravitating towards like a CDK as our preferred tool, but the industry is certainly neck deep in Terraform. So I think both tools are great. They both do what they do really well. So no clear-cut winner. But that's okay. We're just here to talk about what's out there and what options there are. So, yeah, on that note, I want to thank everyone for joining the call. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to add, you're saying there's no clear-cut winner. This is something that I've told my clients over and over again. It's less important what tool you choose for infrastructure as code as long as you're using infrastructure as code.
That is good advice. Yeah, and if just like any code, if it's left there to rot, it will rot. So you can't just it needs to be nurtured and maintained and optimized. So yeah, Lance, did you have something to add?
Yeah, a cautionary tale about having too much power in your configuration. You start getting so much power in these languages and loops and and classes and all this, stuff, and you end up looking like Capistrano again, or, some of these older Ruby. We did this a long time ago, and there were reasons why we kind of abandoned it. It got complicated and just layers on top of layers. It cautionary tale that maybe having that much power isn't a great thing, and that we really should stick to defining our high level abstractions and use those,
Yeah, just to add to that, like I'm involved with the AWS user experience group or whatever, and like I got a preview. I think I can say this now that it's out, but got a preview of CDK, um, and was using it. They're one of my thoughts, and I was like, ooh, like this, like I see just even harder, right? This abstraction layer is just like adding another layer, making it even harder to see what's going on, and it's like too powerful, like you were saying, and could lead to even more of a mess.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard to look at it like a class written in CDK and like understand exactly what the output is going to be, right? It's not like with declarative, like that's the power of declarative. What you see is what you get. So, okay, everyone. Yeah, thanks. It seems like a very vibrant conversation, and appreciate everyone's insights, and hope you can join us again next week. And thanks again, Tom and Jason, for co-hosting with me, and all the members of the GLTL who hopped in and gave their insights and questions as well. It's much appreciated, and hope everyone has a great rest of their week. Adios.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Thank you.
Yeah.